my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law pushed my face into a plate of hot mashed potatoes and said, "Go on, taste the food." That's when one of the guests turned pale and shouted, "She's a billionaire." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Stay with me until the end, and comment where you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into that reception hall. The way the chatter stopped mid-sentence, the way heads turned, eyes followed, and whispers floated behind me like shadows. But I ignored it all. All I could think about was my son, Felix, and how much I wanted this day to be perfect for him. The ceremony had been beautiful. Felix looked so handsome in his black tuxedo, tears glistening as Raya walked down the aisle in her flowing white gown. For a brief, fragile moment, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. Maybe this marriage would bring Felix back to me. Maybe Raya would be the bridge that finally healed our family. I couldn't have been more wrong. The reception took place in a grand downtown ballroom. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above ivory-draped tables. I had offered to help pay for the venue, but Raya insisted they would handle it themselves. "We want to do it our way, Mrs. Morrison," she'd said with that sugary smile that never quite reached her eyes. My seat was at table 12, near the back, not with the family, not near the couple, just tucked away beside distant relatives and acquaintances who looked uneasy talking to me. As the evening dragged on, I watched Felix whirl Raya across the dance floor, her laughter echoing above the music. He looked so happy, so completely lost in her world. When was the last time he'd looked at me like that? Had he ever? Dinner was served around 8. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, and creamy mashed potatoes. I picked at my food, appetite gone. Beside me, Aunt Margaret leaned close and whispered, "You must be so proud." I forced a smile. "I am. He deserves happiness." Then I noticed Raya moving toward our table. Her steps were steady, her jaw tight, like she'd made up her mind about something. Felix was nowhere in sight. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done for Felix." Her tone made the hairs on my neck rise. "Of course, dear," I managed. "He's my son." "Yes," she said, her smile sharpening. "You've been such a devoted mother, always working night shifts, missing his school plays, his baseball games, always so busy." The conversations around us died instantly. All eyes turned to us. My heart began to pound. "Raya," I said quietly, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, I think it's perfect," she cut in, stepping closer. I could smell the alcohol on her breath. "Felix told me all about those years, how you were never home, how he spent nights alone while you were off doing whatever you did." My cheeks burned. "I was working. After his father passed." "After his father passed, you left him to raise himself," her voice rose. "And now you want to play the loving grandmother, the woman who was never there?" Gasps rippled across the room. Phones came out. People started recording. "Raya, please," I whispered. "Please what?" she mocked. "Pretend you were a good mother? Pretend Felix doesn't still wake up remembering how empty that house felt?" I tried to stand, but she pressed a firm hand on my shoulder. In her other hand, she held a plate, piled high with mashed potatoes, still steaming. "You know what, Mrs. Morrison?" she said, her voice dripping with cruelty. "Since you're so interested in family dinners now, why don't you actually taste it?" Before I could react, the plate slammed into my face. The hot potatoes burned my skin as they slid down my cheek and neck. The impact knocked me sideways, my dress ruined, my dignity shattered. She stood over me, her mask completely gone. "Now you know what a real family meal tastes like," she said coldly. The room was silent. The pain wasn't just from the heat, it was from the shock, the betrayal, and the unbearable humiliation. I sat frozen, food dripping from my hair, surrounded by people too stunned to move, and that was the moment someone near the head table whispered in horror, "She's a billionaire." The ballroom exploded into chaos. Gasps filled the air. Chairs screeched as guests jumped to their feet, phones flashing, voices overlapping. Someone yelled for napkins. Someone else shouted for hotel security. But through all the noise, one voice cut through, clear and trembling. A man near the bar, eyes wide, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh my God! Do you people even know who you just humiliated? That's Della Morrison. She's worth over $3 billion. Silence. Pure, deafening silence. Every head turned toward me, the woman sitting alone, covered in mashed potatoes, hair ruined, dignity in pieces. $3 billion. The words hung in the air like an electric current, changing everything in an instant. Raya's face drained of color. Her hand, still clutching the empty plate, began to shake. I could see it happening. The recalculation in everyone's minds, the dawning horror that the quiet, modest mother at table 12 was not who they thought she was. I slowly rose to my feet, the potato mixture sliding down my cheek. No one said a word. No one dared to move. The sound of my heels on the marble floor echoed like thunder as I walked toward the exit. Just before the door, I heard Felix's voice, frantic, confused. Mom, wait! What's he talking about? $3 billion! What is he saying?" I didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to see the look on his face, the disbelief, the questions, the hurt of realizing his mother had hidden something this big. That night, back in my small apartment, rinsing mashed potatoes from my hair, I made a decision that would change everything. They wanted to know the truth about Della Morrison. They were about to find out exactly what I was capable of when pushed too far. 3 days passed before Felix called. 3 long, quiet days of staring at my phone, waiting for it to light up. When it finally did, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk," he said flatly. No greeting, no concern. "Raya wants to apologize." Of course she did. Now that she knew who I really was, suddenly she wanted to make things right. "I'll come to your place," I said softly. "No," Felix interrupted. "Neutral ground. The cafe on 5th. 1 hour." The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. That tone, distant, formal, detached. He spoke to me the same way he probably spoke to his clients, and maybe that's all I'd ever been to him. A provider, not a mother. I arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table by the rain-streaked window. Outside, autumn leaves swirled through puddles under the gray sky. A perfect mirror of how I felt inside. When Felix finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The joy I'd seen at his wedding was gone, replaced by suspicion and tension. Raya wasn't with him. "Where's your wife?" I asked gently. "She's processing everything," he replied, his voice clipped. He ordered coffee, then looked at me with eyes that no longer held warmth. "Is it true, Mom?" he asked. "Are you really worth billions?" The question hit like a blade, sharp and heavy. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my mind, but when the moment came, I still wasn't ready. "Yes," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "How? Where to begin? How do you explain 30 years of sacrifice, of working in silence, of building an empire for a son who never knew the truth?" "It started after your father passed," I began, my hands trembling slightly. "Do you remember those months after the funeral?" "I remember being alone," he said bitterly. The words stung more than I expected. "You were 6, I said softly. "Your father left us with nothing but debts and a small insurance policy. I had a choice. Find a way to survive or let everything fall apart." I paused, took a sip of my coffee, and forced myself to continue. "I started cleaning office buildings at night. That's where I met Harold Weinstein. He owned a struggling real estate company. He'd work late, and we'd talk while I cleaned his office." Felix leaned forward, listening now despite himself. "Harold saw something in me," I said. "He taught me about property, about investments. 5 years later, when he retired, he sold me his company, almost for nothing. Said I reminded him of his daughter. That wasn't the whole truth. Harold had seen more than potential. He'd seen desperation, determination. He'd seen a woman who would never stop fighting for her child. I was good at it, Felix. Better than good, I continued, my voice steady. I could see opportunities no one else could. Within 10 years, I went from small offices to high-rise developments, and then to international investments. I looked him straight in the eyes. All for you. Every deal, every risk, every sleepless night. It was always for you. Felix's voice rose, sharp enough to draw glances from nearby tables. So you just forgot to mention this? He demanded. You let me grow up thinking we were poor. You let me take out loans, apply for scholarships, live like a ghost while you sat on billions. You could have paid for Harvard. His words cut deeper than any knife. This was the wound, the one festering for decades. I wanted you to have your own life, I said softly, leaning across the table. Free from people who only see you as a bank account. Free from gold diggers. I wanted you to find love that was real, not just someone chasing your money. Felix laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a sound I'd heard before, at the wedding. Raya's laugh. Cold, ironic. Because in trying to protect him from fortune hunters, I had left him wide open to a different kind of predator. You have no idea what growing up rich does to a child, I continued quietly. I've seen it destroy families. It twists children into people who never learn the value of work or real relationships. So instead, Felix said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, you made me feel worthless. His eyes glistened. Do you know what it was like, Mom? Watching other kids get picked up after school while you were always gone? Missing every play, every game, every conference? I thought you didn't care. My heart cracked a little more with each word. I cared, I whispered. I cared so much I worked myself to exhaustion for you. Every late night, every missed dinner, every choice I made. No. Felix shook his head. You did it for your guilt, your need to prove something. You could have balanced it, but you chose the money. He was wrong, but I couldn't tell him the whole truth. Not yet. He didn't know about the lawyers I'd hired to protect us from his father's family, who tried to claim he wasn't really their heir. He didn't know about the private security I'd paid for when his father's old associates came looking for money. He didn't know about the trust fund set up to make him independently wealthy on his 40th birthday, no matter what happened to me. I know you're angry, I said instead, and you have every right to be. I made mistakes, but everything I did was to protect you. Protect me from what? Felix hissed. From having a mother who was actually present? No, the words stung because they were true. I had been absent, physically, emotionally. The empire I'd built had consumed me, driven by the terror that if I ever slowed down, I'd lose the only family I had left. From people like Raya, I said quietly. Felix's face flushed. Don't you dare. Raya loves me. Raya attacked me at your wedding, I reminded him, my voice steady. In front of 200 people. She humiliated me publicly. Is that what love looks like? She was protecting me, Felix shot back, protecting me from a selfish, absent mother. I sat back, suddenly feeling very old, very tired. Maybe she was, I admitted. But that doesn't change what she did, or what she's planning to do now that she knows about the money. For a heartbeat, something flickered in Felix's eyes. Doubt, maybe. But then his jaw hardened again. I need time, he said, pushing his chair back. All of it, Felix, I pleaded. Wait. No, Mom. For 30 years you've been lying to me. For 30 years you've let me believe we were struggling when you were sitting on billions. I need to figure out what else you've been hiding. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone at the table with my cold coffee and the weight of 3 decades of secrets. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet. Ice formed on the windows as my mind raced. Felix was angry, confused, hurt. I understood that. But Raya was something else entirely. The look in her eyes before the attack, the way her words were sharpened to wound, the public spectacle, none of it had been spontaneous. She'd known about my money before that guest blurted it out. The only question was, How long? And what did she plan to do with that knowledge now? I pulled out my phone and scrolled until I found the number I needed. Marcus Chen, my head of security for 15 years, former FBI. A man who specialized in protecting high-net-worth individuals from both external and internal threats. "Marcus," I said when he answered, "I need a full background check, quietly. If Raya thought she could humiliate me and then stroll back into my life now that she knew I was wealthy, she was about to learn exactly what Della Morrison did to people who threatened her family." 72 hours later, Marcus's report landed on my desk. 3 thick manila folders, each heavier than I expected. I opened the first one, coffee growing cold beside me, and began to read about the woman my son had married. Raya Elizabeth Novak, born in Cleveland, Ohio, 28 years old, dropped out of college 3 times. No steady employment for the last 5 years. That line alone was suspicious enough. But what came next froze my blood. The photographs. Marcus had managed to dig up images from deleted social media accounts. Nothing ever truly disappears when you know where to look. There she was, Raya, smiling in designer gowns at charity galas in Miami, champagne glass in hand, always beside different men, older, wealthy, powerful, first-class vacations, diamond jewelry, exclusive parties, each man richer than the last. Marcus's notes told the rest of the story. David Rothschild, 42, heir to a pharmaceutical empire, dated Raya for 8 months. She disappeared with $20,000 from his personal account, no charges filed. Michael Torres, 39, Chicago restaurateur, engaged to her for 6 months before discovering she'd used his credit cards to fund her luxury trips. Again, no legal action taken. Jonathan Wright, 35, tech entrepreneur. Their relationship ended when his accountant noticed unexplained withdrawals from shared accounts. The pattern was undeniable. Raya wasn't some misguided woman who'd fallen in love with my son and lost her temper at a wedding. She was a professional. She targeted men with precision, studied them, mirrored them, and then drained them. And now she'd found her biggest target yet, my son. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I needed to call Felix, to show him these files, to make him understand what kind of person he'd married, but before I could dial, the doorbell rang. I froze. Felix stood in the hallway. For one brief, painful second, my heart lifted. Maybe he'd come to apologize. Maybe he'd finally understood. Then I saw her, standing just behind him. Raya. That faint smile on her lips told me everything. "Mom," Felix said, his tone measured, almost businesslike, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, masking my dread. The files were spread across my dining table, but they'd have to pass through the living room first. In one motion, I slid the folders under a stack of magazines. "I'm glad you came," I said evenly, though looking at Raya made my skin crawl. She wore a simple black dress, hair neatly pulled back, makeup soft, the very image of quiet remorse. "Please, sit down." Raya perched on the edge of the sofa, as if afraid to make herself too comfortable. Felix remained standing, arms crossed. "Raya has something she wants to say," he announced. I nodded slowly. "I'm listening." She dabbed delicately at her eyes with a tissue, though there were no tears. "Mrs. Morrison," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "I owe you a sincere apology. What I did at the wedding was unforgivable. I was emotional, overwhelmed. I let my feelings about Felix's past cloud my judgment." It was a convincing act, almost perfect. If I hadn't seen those files, I might have believed her. "I see," I said carefully. "I was only trying to protect Felix," she continued, stealing a glance at him. "I know how much he struggled growing up feeling abandoned, when I thought you were just—" She hesitated, pretending to search for the right word. "When I didn't understand your situation, I reacted badly." "My situation?" I asked quietly. Felix shifted uncomfortably. "She means when we thought you were struggling, before we found out about everything." "Everything," I repeated. "You mean my money." "Our wealth," Raya corrected gently. Felix told me about your real estate success. I had no idea, Mrs. Morrison. If I'd known... What difference would it have made? I asked. Well, she said, smiling faintly, I would have understood why you worked so much when Felix was young. Building an empire takes sacrifice. I see that now. She reached for Felix's hand. We both do. I watched his face soften. The doubt I'd seen days earlier was gone. He wanted to believe this story. He needed to. That's very understanding of you, I said calmly. Both of you. Raya smiled again, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For just a flicker of a second, the mask slipped. Something cold flashed beneath. Family is everything, isn't it? She said sweetly. Now that we know the truth about your success, I hope we can start fresh. Maybe you could tell us more about your business. Felix and I would love to learn. There it was. The real reason they'd come. She wasn't here for forgiveness. She was here for information. I smiled back, mirroring her tone. I'd be happy to share, I lied. But first, perhaps you could tell me a little more about yourself, Raya. I realize I know so little about the woman my son married. Her smile faltered just a bit. Oh, there's not much to tell, she said lightly. I grew up in Ohio, small-town girl. My parents passed away a few years ago. No brothers, no sisters. Felix is really all the family I have now. Every word was perfectly rehearsed, a flawless performance, if I hadn't known the truth. Her parents were alive, living quietly in the suburbs of Cleveland. 2 brothers, 1 sister. All of them had cut contact years ago, reasons still under investigation. How tragic, I said softly. Losing your parents so young. It was difficult, she replied, pressing the tissue to her eyes again. But it taught me how precious family is, how important it is to protect the people you love. Felix squeezed her hand, his expression tender and protective, completely blind. Raya smiled faintly, then said, Actually, Felix and I have been talking about the future, about children, about providing for them. It's wonderful to know they'll have such a successful grandmother. Her words hit me like a bucket of ice. Children. She was already planning the next move. Grandchildren that would tie her permanently to my family and my fortune. Children are a blessing, I managed to say evenly. We're trying, Felix added, his voice soft, open, full of hope. And that hope broke my heart. We want to start a family right away, he said. How wonderful, I replied, forcing a smile as every instinct inside me screamed. I needed them gone. I needed to think, to plan, to save my son from the trap he didn't even know he was walking into. Actually, I said, standing, I have a conference call with my lawyers shortly. We can continue this conversation another time. Raya's eyes flickered at the word lawyers. Estate planning. That phrase had caught her attention. Of course, she said quickly. We wouldn't want to keep you from important business. They gathered their things. At the door, Raya turned, the picture of remorseful grace. Mrs. Morrison, I just want you to know how much it means to Felix that we're rebuilding this relationship. He's been so hurt by the distance between you two. I think understanding why you worked so hard will help him heal. I hope so, I said quietly. When the door closed, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then I went straight back to the dining table and pulled Marcus's files into the light again. This time, I focused on the timeline. When had Raya first appeared in Felix's life? According to Marcus's notes, they met 18 months ago, at a coffee shop near Felix's office. She had accidentally spilled her drink on him, but Felix didn't work at the main Morrison Holdings office. He worked for a smaller subsidiary, one that managed a portion of my real estate investments. That connection wasn't public, not unless someone had researched my corporate structure. She'd known, from the very beginning. I grabbed my phone. Marcus, I said when he picked up. I need surveillance, 24 hours. I want to know where they go, who they meet, what they discuss, and find out if they consult any lawyers. Estate lawyers? He asked. Among others, I replied coldly. I glanced down at the photos spread across the table, Raya with her previous victims, all smiling, all fooled. "And Marcus," I added, "contact these men. Find out exactly what she did to them and why none of them pressed charges. Because if Raya thought she could charm her way into my fortune by pretending to be the devoted wife and future mother, she was about to learn that I hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being naive. The war for my son's future had begun, and I intended to win. But as I stared at a new photo of Felix and Raya leaving my building, his arm around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder, I felt something twist painfully inside me. Winning might cost me the one thing I'd spent my entire life protecting, my son's love. But if losing him meant saving him from her, I was willing to pay that price. Marcus's surveillance reports arrived like clockwork every morning, and each one made my blood run colder. Raya was wasting no time. 2 days after their visit, she'd convinced Felix to make an appointment with Harrison Associates, one of the city's most prestigious estate law firms, the same firm that had been courting my business for years. 3 days later, she had lunch with Dr. Patricia Kellerman, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations for elderly clients with large estates. By the end of the first week, I knew exactly what Raya was planning. She wasn't just after my money. She was preparing to have me declared mentally incompetent. Once Felix gained power of attorney, she'd control him completely, and through him, everything I'd ever built. It was brilliant, in a cold and calculated way, and it might have worked. If I hadn't spent 30 years learning how to outthink people who underestimated me. I was in my study, reviewing Marcus's latest photographs, when a knock sounded at the door. "Mrs. Morrison," my housekeeper said softly, "your son is here. He says it's urgent." "Send him in," I replied, slipping the photos into a drawer and straightening my jacket. Felix walked in alone. That alone surprised me. For the past week, Raya had been attached to him like a shadow. He looked tired. His eyes were hollow, his face drawn. "Mom," he said, taking the chair across from me, "we need to talk. About your health." There it was. The opening move. "My health is fine, Felix," I said calmly. "Why do you ask?" "Raya's been worried," he began carefully. "She thinks you might be struggling with some memory problems." I almost laughed. Of course, the setup was already in motion. "What kind of memory problems?" I asked evenly. Felix shifted, avoiding my gaze. "She said that when you two talked last week, you seemed confused. You mixed up dates, forgot conversations." None of which had ever happened, but I could see it now. How easily Raya could twist a story, plant a seed of doubt and watch it grow. Felix wanted to believe her, about everything. Why stop now? "I see," I said slowly. "And what does Raya think I should do about these supposed memory issues?" "She thinks you should see a doctor," he said. "Get evaluated, maybe. Consider some help managing your affairs." "My affairs," I repeated, voice calm but cold, "are perfectly well managed, Felix." "Are they?" he asked softly, leaning forward. And for the first time I saw it, not Raya's manipulation, not greed, but genuine concern in my son's eyes. "Mom, you're 73 years old," Felix said, his tone hardening. "You're sitting on billions of dollars and you live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. That's not normal." Exactly the argument I'd expected. Raya had trained him well. Paint my modest lifestyle as proof of declining judgment, rather than a deliberate choice to live quietly. "I live the way I choose to live," I replied calmly. "The same way I've lived for 20 years. "But that's just it," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. 20 years ago, I thought we were broke. Now I find out you've been wealthy this whole time. How do I know what else you've been hiding? How do I know you're still capable of making good decisions?" I studied his face. Behind the anger was real confusion, genuine worry, seeds Raya had planted, now blooming exactly as she'd intended. "What would make you feel better?" I asked softly. "Just see a doctor, Mom. Get checked. Then we can stop worrying." He hesitated before adding, "Raya and I both just want to make sure you're okay." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. I suppose that would be reasonable. Do you have someone in mind? Felix exhaled, relief flickering across his features. Actually, Raya found someone, Dr. Kellerman. She specializes in seniors. Great reputation. Of course she did. The same Dr. Kellerman Raya had met for lunch last week, the one who had likely already been briefed on what kind of diagnosis would serve Raya's plan. I'd prefer to choose my own doctor, I said. Felix's jaw tightened. Mom, you can't just keep refusing help. This is about your safety, your well-being, and my money. The words hung between us like smoke. He flushed but didn't deny it. This isn't about money, he said, though the conviction was gone. It's about family, about protecting you. Protecting me from what? I asked quietly. From myself? From people who might take advantage of you. He began pacing in front of my desk. Do you have any idea how vulnerable you are? How many people would love to get their hands on your fortune? Yes, I said evenly. I do. Something in my tone made him pause. For a moment, I saw the sharp-minded boy he used to be. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said slowly, that I've been protecting myself and my assets for 30 years. It means I know exactly who poses a threat to me, and it isn't strangers. Felix frowned. Then who? I met his eyes. Ask yourself who benefits most if I'm declared incompetent, who gains control of my estate, who suggested the doctor pushing for this evaluation, who's been so concerned about my mental health ever since learning how much I'm worth? Felix went perfectly still. You're talking about my wife. I'm talking about patterns, Felix, I replied, about people who target the wealthy for personal gain. That's absurd, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Raya loves me. She married me before she knew about the money. Did she? I asked quietly. The question landed. Doubt flickered behind his eyes. What are you implying? I'm saying, I said, you might want to ask yourself how a woman with no job and no savings managed to afford the designer dress she wore to your wedding, or how she's maintained her lifestyle for the past 2 years. Where does the money come from? Felix didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, she's my wife. We're trying to have children. I can't just... You can't just what? I interrupted gently. Protect yourself? Protect your future children from someone who might see them as tickets to a fortune? You don't know her like I do, he said. You're right, I said, reaching into my desk drawer. I know her better. I pulled out one of Marcus's folders. Not the full report, not yet, but enough. I handed it to him. What is this? Felix asked, his hands trembling. The truth about the woman you married. He opened it. His eyes darted over the pages, then his face drained of color. When he reached the photographs, he actually gasped. Where did you get these? I had her investigated, I said quietly, the same way I investigate anyone who threatens my family. You had my wife investigated? His voice rose, more shocked than angry. I had a stranger who attacked me in front of 200 guests investigated, I corrected. A stranger who suddenly wanted reconciliation right after learning about my wealth. Felix sank back into his chair, still staring at the photos. These men, who are they? Her previous targets, I said. All older, all wealthy, all left poorer when she was done with them. This can't be real. It has to be some kind of mistake. I picked up my phone, pressed play. Marcus's voice recordings filled the room. She was perfect at first, said a man's weary voice, David Rothschild. Loving, attentive, made me feel like the most important man in the world. But now, looking back, it was all calculated. Every smile, every word, every touch, designed to make me trust her completely. Felix's hands began to shake. He set the folder down slowly, as if it might burn him. And for the first time since the wedding, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. Felix's face crumpled as the recording ended. The pain in his eyes was something I'll never forget. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Since the day after you came here with her," I said. "I suspected something was wrong the moment she attacked me, but I needed proof." "And you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me?" I asked softly. "Or would you have accused me of trying to destroy your marriage out of jealousy?" He said nothing, because we both knew the answer. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. "That depends," I said. "Do you want to save your marriage or save yourself?" "I want to save both." "That's not possible, Felix," I said gently. "Not with someone like Raya. People like her don't change. They just get better at pretending." He stood abruptly, still clutching the folder. "I need time to think. I need to process this." "Time," I warned, "is something you might not have much of. She's already met with lawyers and doctors. Whatever she's planning, it's moving fast." "I know," he murmured, his voice breaking. I thought I finally had a family. Someone who loved me." The pain in his voice shattered me. "You do have family," I said. "You have me." "Do I?" His voice cracked. "Because for 30 years you've been lying to me about who you are." "I've been protecting you," I said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" he asked. Then quietly, "I don't know who to trust anymore, Mom. I don't know what's real." He walked out, and the sound of the door closing echoed through the empty house. For a long time, I sat in silence, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. I'd planted the seeds of doubt, but Raya wouldn't give up easily, and Felix was still too vulnerable. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "I need you to accelerate the investigation," I said, "and arrange a meeting with someone from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. If Raya's done this to multiple victims, there could be grounds for federal charges." "You want to have your son's wife arrested?" Marcus asked carefully. "I want to save my son before it's too late," I said, "because sometimes protecting the people you love means making choices they'll never forgive you for, and sometimes being a mother means being willing to be the villain in your child's story so they live long enough to have one." 2 weeks passed without a word from Felix, 2 weeks of watching surveillance footage, each report colder than the last. Raya was tightening her grip. She'd moved them into a luxury apartment downtown paid for, with whose money, I could only guess, and had started introducing Felix to financial advisors specializing in family wealth management. The trap was closing, and my son either couldn't see it or refused to. That's when I decided to force the issue. I called him on a Thursday afternoon, my voice carefully modulated soft, a little shaky, just enough to sound frail. "Felix, it's your mother. I was wondering, could you and Raya come for dinner on Saturday? I think we need to clear the air between us." There was a long pause. "Mom, are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine, dear. Just tired. This whole situation has been weighing on me. I think Raya was right. Maybe I do need to start making some changes, planning for the future." I could practically hear the relief in his voice. "Of course we'll come. What time?" 7 o'clock, I said. "And Felix, I'd like to discuss my estate planning. I think it's time I started trusting family to help me make important decisions." After hanging up, I called Marcus. "Saturday night," I said. "I want full audio and video coverage of my apartment. Hidden cameras, directional microphones, everything." "What are you planning?" he asked. "I'm going to let Raya hang herself with her own rope?" Saturday evening arrived gray and wet. I spent the day preparing not just dinner, but the performance of my life. I dressed in clothes a size too large, applied my makeup unevenly, left my hair slightly disheveled. I needed to look like a woman slipping quietly into decline. When Felix and Raya arrived, they were perfectly on time. Felix looked nervous, glancing between us as if expecting a spark to ignite. Raya, however, was radiant in her quiet confidence. She wore a simple but expensive dress, the very image of a caring daughter-in-law. "Mrs. Morrison," she said sweetly, taking my hands as she air-kissed my cheeks, "you look tired. Are you feeling all right?" "Oh, you know how it is at my age," I said, letting my voice waver slightly. Some days are better than others. Thank you both for coming. It means so much to have family around. Dinner was pot roast, Felix's childhood favorite, but I'd deliberately overcooked it. The vegetables were soft, the gravy too salty. Small details that would quietly support the image I needed. "This is delicious, Mom," Felix said loyally, though I could see him struggling to swallow. "Is it?" I asked, pretending uncertainty. I wasn't sure about the seasoning. I seem to have trouble with recipes lately. Yesterday, I put sugar in my coffee 3 times and couldn't remember doing it. Raya's eyes brightened, her expression full of practiced concern. "That must be frustrating," she said gently. "Have you considered getting some help? Maybe someone to assist with cooking and managing the household?" "I don't know," I said, pushing food around my plate. "I've always been independent, but lately I feel so confused about things, especially finances, all those numbers and accounts." Raya leaned forward slightly, her tone warm and sympathetic, but her eyes sharp as glass. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison," she said softly, "you shouldn't have to worry about any of that, not at your age." And just like that, she took the bait. "It's overwhelming," I said softly. Felix and Raya exchanged a quick glance. The hook was baited. "Maybe we could help," Raya offered sweetly. "Felix is wonderful with financial matters, aren't you, honey?" Felix nodded, though I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "If you want, Mom, I could take a look at your portfolio just to make sure everything's in order." "Would you?" I said, letting relief fill my voice. I reached across the table and patted his hand. "That would mean so much." I paused, as if a sudden thought had come to me. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said before, about seeing a doctor, getting my affairs in order." "Really?" Raya leaned forward, unable to hide her excitement. "I've already scheduled an appointment with that doctor you recommended," I said softly. "Dr. Kellerman, and I spoke with my lawyer about updating my will." Raya's face brightened instantly, her voice dripping with false concern. "That's wonderful news, Mrs. Morrison. What kind of changes are you considering?" Here it was, the moment I'd been building toward. I let my face crumple slightly, lowering my voice to a tremble. "I'm so ashamed," I whispered. "All these years, I've been such a terrible mother to Felix, working constantly, missing everything important. I don't deserve to call myself his mother." "Mom, don't say that," Felix protested, reaching for me, but Raya's eyes were alight, her mind racing, calculating every word. "No," I continued, "it's true, and now, at the end of my life, I want to make it right. I want to make sure you're taken care of, you, Raya, and your future children." "What are you saying?" Felix asked, clearly stunned. "I'm saying I want to transfer most of my assets to you now, while I'm still alive to see you enjoy them." Raya's breath caught. "Dr. Kellerman explained," I added, "that people my age often struggle with complex decisions. She said it's better to hand things over while I can still choose for myself." "That's very wise, Mrs. Morrison," Raya said quickly, unable to hold back any longer. "So many elderly people wait too long, and their families have to make difficult choices for them." "Exactly," I said with a small nod. "Much better this way." I dabbed my eyes with a napkin. I was thinking of transferring about 60% of my liquid assets immediately, maybe setting up a trust with Felix as the primary beneficiary and you, Raya, as co-trustee. Raya's smile widened. Felix's face, on the other hand, went pale. "Mom, that's hundreds of millions of dollars. Money I should have shared with you long ago," I said, my voice trembling. I was so selfish, so focused on business that I forgot what really mattered: family. Raya was practically glowing. "This is such a generous gesture," she said, "and so practical. Felix, your mother is showing real wisdom here." "I suppose," Felix said slowly, "but Mom, are you sure? That's a huge decision." "I'm sure," I said firmly. In fact, I'd like to begin the paperwork this week. I have my appointment with Dr. Kellerman on Tuesday for the competency evaluation, and I'd like everything signed before then." "Why before?" Felix asked. I let my voice go small and frightened. In case she finds something wrong with me. If there's any issue with my memory or judgment, I want it on record that I made this choice while I was still myself. Raya reached over, squeezing my hand gently. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Morrison. Very responsible." "There's just one thing," I added, as if remembering suddenly. "My lawyer insists on recording our conversation about the transfer. Legal protection, he says, to prove I'm acting of my own free will." For a split second, Raya's mask slipped. I saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes, followed by the greed that drowned it out. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Complete transparency is always best in these situations." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of logistics. Raya suggested attorneys who could speed things up. She mentioned financial advisors who could help manage the transition. She even proposed that Felix begin taking a more active role in my company's operations. By the time they stood to leave, Raya looked radiant. She hugged me warmly, her voice soft and rehearsed. "Mrs. Morrison, I can't tell you how much this means to Felix, to both of us. You're giving us such a wonderful gift." "It's the least I can do," I said gently. "After all the years I lost with my son." Felix kissed my cheek. There was something in his eyes that shattered me hope. He truly believed this was his mother trying to make amends. He had no idea he was about to watch his wife's entire facade collapse. After they left, I sat in silence for exactly 1 hour. Then I picked up the phone. "Marcus," I said, "did you get everything?" "Crystal clear video and audio," he replied. She took the bait completely. "Good. Now contact Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI. Tell her I have evidence of an ongoing scheme to defraud an elderly individual. Tell her I have surveillance footage of the perpetrator discussing a plan to manipulate a medical evaluation and gain control of assets through coercion." Marcus hesitated. "You're really going through with this?" I thought of Felix's hopeful face, of the grandchildren Raya was already planning to use as leverage, of the empire I'd built and the years of sacrifice she thought she could undo. "She made one mistake," I said quietly. "She assumed that because I'm 73 and live modestly, I must be weak. She confused appearance with reality. And Felix, my beautiful, broken son. He would hate me for this. He might never forgive me, but at least he would be free." "Felix will understand one day," I said softly. "And if he doesn't, well, at least he'll be alive and secure enough to hate me. Because sometimes being a mother isn't about being loved. It's about saving your children from the people they trust most, even when they'll never thank you for it." Tuesday morning, Dr. Kellerman would find herself sitting across from 2 federal agents, explaining why she had agreed to provide a predetermined diagnosis. And Raya Novak Morrison was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never underestimate a woman who built an empire from nothing. Raya would soon learn that elderly victims aren't always as helpless as they appear. And Felix would finally understand that his mother's greatest act of love wasn't giving him money. It was taking away the woman who would have destroyed him. The game was almost over. All I had to do was survive the final move. The call came at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. Felix's voice was raw, broken, barely recognizable. "Mom!" They arrested Raya. I was already dressed, already waiting. I'd been awake since 4, knowing this moment would come. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. "The FBI came to our apartment at 5 a.m. They had a warrant. They said she's being charged with elder fraud, conspiracy, and something about crossing state lines to commit financial crimes." He paused, his breath trembling. "Mom, they showed me things, documents, recordings, evidence of other people she's done this to." "Where are you now?" "At the police station. They wanted to question me, but my lawyer says I'm not a suspect, just a victim." The last word came out bitter, almost like an insult. "Come home, Felix," I said gently. "Come to my apartment. I don't know if I can face you right now. Come anyway." 2 hours later, he stood in my doorway, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes red, his shoulders heavy with shame. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "How long have you known?" he demanded. "Sit down, sweetheart." "How long?" "Since the day after your wedding." He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "You've known for weeks that my wife was a criminal, and you didn't tell me." "I tried," I said quietly. "You wouldn't listen." "You could have tried harder." "Could I?" I asked softly. "What would you have done if I'd shown you that evidence 2 weeks ago? Would you have believed me or accused me of trying to ruin your marriage out of jealousy?" He was silent. We both knew the truth. "The FBI agent who interviewed me," Felix said finally, "told me Raya's been doing this for at least 5 years. Multiple victims, multiple states. They think she stole over $2 million. I know." He looked up sharply. "And you knew that too?" "Yes." "Jesus, Mom," his voice cracked. "Do you know what it feels like to find out your entire marriage was a lie? That the woman you thought loved you was just calculating your worth like a number on a spreadsheet?" My heart broke for him. "No, Felix," I said softly. "I don't know that pain, but I do know what it's like to watch your child be destroyed by someone who pretends to love them." He nodded slowly, tears spilling down his cheeks. "She seemed so perfect," he whispered, "so understanding about my childhood, about you. She made me feel like someone finally got it, like someone finally understood why I was angry with you." "That's what people like Raya do," I said. "They find your wounds and make you believe they're the cure." Felix walked to the window, staring out at the gray skyline. "She's pregnant, Mom." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "She told me last week, said she wanted to wait until after dinner with you to announce it, said she wanted us to be a united family before bringing a baby into the world." His laugh was hollow, bitter. Even that was probably a lie. I felt the blood drain from my face. A baby. It would have been the perfect trap, the one connection that would have tied him to her forever. "The FBI will need to verify that," I said carefully. "If she's lying, they'll find out, and if she's not—" I hesitated. The thought of my grandchild being born into Raya's manipulation made me physically ill. "We'll figure it out," I said finally. "One step at a time." Felix turned back to me, his expression hard. "Will we? Because I'm starting to wonder if I can trust anyone at all. You lied to me my whole life about who you were. Raya lied to me about who she was. How am I supposed to know what's real?" "You start," I said, "by asking yourself who benefits from the lies." He frowned, uncertain. "I lied to protect you from opportunists, from predators, from people who saw you as a meal ticket. Raya lied to use you. Intent matters, Felix." "Does it?" he asked quietly. "Because either way, I feel like I don't even know my own life." I stood and walked toward him. "Then let me tell you your life," I said. "Let me tell you the truth I should have told you years ago." For the next 2 hours, I told him everything about his father's debts and the men who came after the funeral demanding repayment, about the nights I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat while studying real estate in borrowed clothes and cheap coffee-fueled exhaustion, about the threats from his father's family, how they tried to claim he wasn't their blood, that he didn't deserve a single yen of inheritance, about the trust fund I'd built that would make him independently wealthy on his 40th birthday, about the scholarship foundation in his name, about the apartment building I'd bought across from his elementary school so I could watch him play at recess when I couldn't be there myself. "You were watching me?" he asked, his voice small. "Every day I could manage it," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I saw you score your first soccer goal. I saw you fall off your bike and get back up. I saw you stand up for a boy twice your size who was being bullied." He turned to look at me, his expression breaking open. "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" "Because you needed to believe you'd done it all on your own," I said. "Because I wanted you to grow strong enough to face a world that would never love you the way I do." I reached for his hand, And this time, he didn't pull away. Outside, the city was waking up sirens, traffic, the hum of another day beginning. Inside, there was only silence. Finally, Felix whispered, "What happens now?" I wiped my eyes and managed a small smile. "Now," I said, "we rebuild. Not the way we were, but maybe the way we should have been all along." And for the first time in years, my son nodded. He didn't say he forgave me. He didn't have to. Because forgiveness isn't always words. Sometimes it's just showing up at 6 a.m. and calling your mother. "I was there, Felix," I said quietly. "Maybe not in the way you needed me to be, but I was always watching, always protecting, always loving you." Felix was crying too now. His voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Because I wanted you to be proud of your own accomplishments," I said softly. "I wanted you to know that you were loved for who you are, not for what you might one day inherit, and because I was terrified that if you knew about the money, you'd attract people like Raya." Felix gave a bitter, broken laugh. "People like Raya found me anyway." "Yes," I said, "but at least now we know who she really is." Before he could respond, my phone rang. It was Agent Chen. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "I wanted to update you on the situation. We've arrested Dr. Kellerman as well. She's been providing fraudulent competency evaluations for a fee, and we've confirmed that Raya Novak is not pregnant. The test she showed your son was purchased online." I closed my eyes in relief. "Thank you for letting me know." "There's something else," the agent added. "Ms. Novak is claiming that you orchestrated this entire situation to frame her. She says you threatened her and coerced her into the conversation we recorded." "Do you believe her?" I asked. "Not for a second," Agent Chen said, "but she's not going quietly. I thought you should know." After I hung up, Felix looked at me with a strange, hollow expression. "She's still lying," he said quietly. "Even now, even caught red-handed. She's still lying." "It's what she does," I said. "It's who she is." He studied me for a moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did you see through her when I couldn't?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "Because I've spent 30 years learning to recognize threats to my family, because I've made it my business to study people who hurt others for profit, and because sometimes being a mother means being suspicious of everyone who claims to love your child." Felix was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I'm going to need therapy, to learn how to trust people again, how to trust myself." "That's smart," I said gently. He nodded. "And I want to know everything about your business, about our family's finances. No more secrets." "Agreed." "And I want to work for you. Really work. I want to learn how you built this, how you protected it, how you protected me." I looked at him, truly looked, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Curiosity, determination, and that sharp spark of intelligence that Raya had tried to extinguish. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's not easy work. Building something real, protecting something valuable, it requires sacrifice." "I'm sure," he said. Then softly, "And Mom? I'm sorry for the things I said, for not trusting you, for bringing her into our lives." "You don't need to apologize for being human, Felix," I said, "for wanting love, for believing in someone who seemed to offer it. That's not a flaw. It's proof you have a good heart." He looked down, his voice breaking. "Even after everything, part of me still, I thought I loved her." "You loved who you thought she was," I said gently. "That person was never real, but your feelings were, and grieving that isn't weakness." 6 months later, Felix and I sat together in my office, our office now, reviewing quarterly reports. He'd thrown himself into learning the business with the same focus he'd once given to earning Raya's approval. But now, that energy was building something real. "The Portland development's ahead of schedule," he reported, flipping through files, "and the Sustainable Housing Initiative is attracting investors faster than we projected." "Good," I said. "What about the scholarship program?" fully funded for the next decade. We've already awarded grants to more than 200 students. I watched him work, my son, my legacy, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The empire I'd built had always been about protecting his future. Now, it was about building that future together. "Felix," I said, "I want you to know something. Everything I did, every choice, every mistake, it was all worth it to reach this moment." He looked up from his papers and smiled softly. "I know, Mom. And for the first time in my life, I really understand what that means." Raya was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Dr. Kellerman lost her license and faced her own charges. Felix had his marriage annulled, erasing the legal ties to a relationship that had never been real. But more than that, we had found our way back to each other. Not as the wounded mother and estranged son we once were, but as the family we were always meant to be. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone hate you until they're ready to understand. Sometimes protecting the people you care about means being willing to be the villain in their story. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they eventually realize that the villain was actually the hero all along. "What's next?" Felix asked, gathering up his reports. I looked out the window at the city sprawling below, the empire we were rebuilding together, the future that was finally, truly ours. "Everything," I said. "We build everything." Now, I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something similar, where love and protection blurred into sacrifice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, I've left 2 more stories waiting for you at the end, true favorites on this channel, and both will absolutely surprise you. Thank you for watching, and remember, not every villain is what they seem.